Welcome to another episode of Home Tech. Seth, how are you?
Good. I'm getting all my money lined up to get ready to invest in Savant Systems when they go public.
You're going to get in on that IPO, huh?
Yeah. I don't know anything about stocks, so I have no idea what any of the speculations about. I don't know. But it looks like there is an interesting article on CE Pro from Julie Jacobson saying that from a couple of things that she's had, that interactions that she's had with Savant and things that have popped up on their website, that they might be going public.
Yeah, I just read the article this afternoon. Interesting. I don't know. It's very speculative at this point. There's not any real concrete evidence that points to it. It certainly wouldn't be shocking. There's obviously a ton of momentum in the smart home market, and traditional companies like Savant and Crestron are certainly getting excited, I'm sure, about where the market is going from a high level. And I think that they're all probably looking to do an IPO at some point. How soon or how realistic or how accurate this article is really anyone's guess.
Yeah, I mean, I highly doubt Crestron will ever go public. They've been private forever, but Control4 is a good example. They went public a couple of months back, or I guess it was last year in August, and have had a pretty good run. They had a spike there when Nest was purchased by Google for $3 billion, and I think everybody kind of started looking around. But then it's kind of leveled off back to where it was before. So I mean, I guess if you had Control4 stock and it went up and you bought low and sold high, that's a good thing. I have no idea.
Yeah. And we won't really get into the nuts and bolts of the article. We'll put a link to it, up in the show notes at HomeTech.fm, and people can go check it out if they're interested. As we've talked about before, it's not really our focus on the show to talk IPOs and Silicon Valley and venture capital. Not really our angle that we kind of approach the show from, but actually it is the angle of our guest on today's show.
Yeah, we had a really good interview with Mike Wolf of NextMarket Insights and the Smart Home Show podcast, which is, along with the NextMarket podcast, is one of my two favorite podcasts to listen to. And I told him that at the beginning of the show because they really are. He does a really good job of finding very interesting people to talk to. And NextMarket can be about anything from music to home automation to something else, art of some type. I don't know. It seems to kind of go all over the place, but it's always an interesting conversation that he has with somebody. And then, of course, Smart Home Show is about new and emerging home technologies, which I kind of like that too.
Yeah, definitely. No, he's been at it for a while, and you can tell he's a very, very talented podcaster. And I would encourage anyone in our audience who hasn't listened to his show to go check it out. It's not exclusively about I didn't want to make it sound like it's exclusively about the kind of the financial aspect of the smart home market. That is kind of his background. He's a research analyst and kind of follows the market from that angle. But he gets great guests on from a lot of the same companies that we're talking about on our show. And, just really interesting to listen to another person's angle on what's going on in the smart home market.
Sure.
Real quick, before we jump into that, just as usual, a reminder that if you're enjoying the show, we would highly encourage you to stop on over at iTunes and leave us a review. The Home Tech podcast is also now available in the Stitcher app. So if that's your weapon of choice for listening to podcasts, you can find us there. And also, we've got a feedback form on the website at HomeTech.fm. And if you're so inclined, feel free to drop by and shoot us an email. Let us know if you have any suggestions for the show or just any general feedback about what you think. We'd be happy to hear from you.
Definitely, we've got a lot of good feedback and from a couple of listeners over the last couple of weeks, I'd say, and it really is just motivating for me. Keeps me going. So
absolutely. All right. Well, without further ado, let's jump into our interview with Mike Wolf.
And we'd like to welcome to the show Mike Wolf. Mike, how's it going?
I'm doing great, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, no problem. You host some of the my most favorite podcasts. I'd say your NextMarket podcast and the Smart Home Show, two of my favorite podcasts to listen to. And
Oh, thanks.
I just really, NextMarket was actually one of the reasons I started. I got with Jason, and we started putting our heads together. And at least my motivation was listening to some of your podcasts early on. I mean, NextMarket's been out for a while. Was one of my motivations to get HomeTech up and running. I'm not sure about Jason, but I definitely got inspired by your work there.
Oh, cool. Well, I went deep dive on the podcast space, and I'm actually kind of at a crossroads of that podcast. We don't have to go in too much detail, but just trying to figure out where to take it because. My consulting and my research business is largely focused on consumer and smart home, which I have the smart home show for now. But so in terms of the NextMarket podcast, I'm still trying to figure that out. But yeah, I mean, that's been a fun one, and it's kind of almost like whatever direction I'm interested in at the time, I'll do guests for that. So
cool, yeah. So for some of our listeners who may not be familiar with the NextMarket podcast. We don't need to stick on that one for too long, but can you talk about what that podcast is all about, just briefly?
Yeah, so it started about late 2012 or early 2013. I had just decided to go independent from GigaOM, where I was the VP of research for 4 years. I helped them start up their research group, and I really liked podcasting. I dabbled in it way back in 2007. 2008 and again in 2010. Never really kind of made a serious run at it. And at the time, I wanted to do a podcast around all the stuff I was kind of interested in and writing research about, including things like online video. And so some of my first guests were like Anthony Wood, the founder of Roku, the guy who invented the DVR, Matt McRae, who's the CTO of Vizio. And then as is the kind of the nerd analyst to me, I get interested and go off on big giant tangents that could swing me for 3 months or 4 months. And I really wanted to understand the podcast market because, I follow all sorts of digital media markets, from online video to music to podcasting. And I felt like the market dynamics in the space were starting to really change. Someone who's a passionate fan. I've always, kind of watched with interest, like guys like Leo Laporte at Twit. And so I spent like 3 months just doing a deep dive. At the same time, knowing I'd write an article for Forbes on kind of the state of the podcast market. So that really kind of created literally fodder for like almost 4 months in terms of like the podcast. And since then, it's been a little bit more eclectic. But overall, it's been an area that focuses on some, 1/3 kind of the podcast space, 1/3 Mike's kind of random interest of the moment, and then another just kind of maybe like startup and kind of digital media disruption. So because I talked to guys like Jack Conte, for example, who founded Patreon. If you guys are familiar with that, you probably are. It's like this really interesting crowdfunding platform. So yeah,
he's a Pomplamoose guy.
He's a Pomplamoose guy, and it's weird that there's a guy who became like a YouTube star that decided to and actually in a second career did a venture funded tech startup. But that's what he did.
Yeah, it's really cool platform.
Very nice. So you had the NextMarket podcast. You've had that for a while now. If I understand correctly, in the course of doing that NextMarket podcast, you were kind of coming across a lot of stories related to the smart home. Did the smart home show, was that kind of born out of topics that you were maybe becoming more interested in the NextMarket podcast?
I mean, partly. I mean, I realized at some point my analyst business, because I've to kind of a little history of me. I mean, I've literally been following home networking since like the 90s, right? I was like one of the few analysts writing about home phone networking in the late 90s, talking to companies like Broadcom. And then I was writing about wireless networking before Wi-Fi was even like the de facto standard. Like Intel was trying to choose between home RF and Wi-Fi. They chose home RF, and then they realized they bet on the wrong horse. So, and that's how I know, for example, Julie Jacobson. We were before the show. We were talking about Julie Jacobson. We were kind of like the first one of the two really early ones writing about this idea of the connected home. I was there battling with the Tricia Parks of the Parks Associates of the world as an analyst at Instat, and so I've had a long interest in home networking. I wrote a book for Pearson Technology on how to network your home, kind of like a For Dummies book in 2001, and so. At the same time, I've always kind of been a guy who's helped start content companies and divisions, and so I was helping to start a practice at GigHome the last 4 years, where I kind of became like more of a manager and wasn't focusing in as much on the writing. But as I went back independent in the last couple of years, I went back to kind of what I really focused on before, which was the connected home. So long story short, to answer your question, it's always been an area I've been interested in. And I tend to look at it a little bit from a fan and an enthusiast, but I'm not as deep a tech user as like a Dave Zatz or even I think you guys. I've always kind of like to analyze how the market's evolving, and that's kind of like one of the things I really like to look at. So I think like it's a nice compliment. Like, you know, your show, you guys are like understand this nature of the industry, but also you probably understand the technology a lot better than I do in terms of like using it and how to install it. And so that's why, for example, Seth was a great guest on the smart home therapy. I needed him to rescue me when we were trying to help Aaron Cohen how to figure out how to do things, right? So, but that's kind of where my history comes from in terms of like my smart home background.
Yeah, I think that's what makes, I mean, both shows really complement each other, because you focus on kind of the business angle and we're focused on the technology angle, and that's, I think it helps round me out a little bit more, because we've kind of talked about it here. We're not the numbers guys. We don't look at the numbers at all. We just, look at the product and kind of look, how will this integrate is usually what I'm trying to figure out when I see a new product on the shelf.
I know if they could just combine us, we'd be like superheroes,
right?
The smart home superhero, like fuse us. No, but I mean, it's always like, it's like the same in everything, right? You feel like I feel like I'm the business guy, like who has like this wonderkind, like coder. Like whenever you're in a business, like the guys who really know the technology, you're always a little bit envious and feel a little bit insecure around them, because like you're like, do I really know what the hell I'm talking about? But like I feel like I know enough to be dangerous, but I also kind of know, having been following for like at least over a decade, kind of the patterns. It's funny, you guys know AMX, right? Back in like 2000. The .com boom came, and they actually changed their name to Panja. I don't know if you guys do. You guys remember that?
Oh yeah.
Yep.
I mean, but no one remembers that type of stuff. I mean,
those are kind of like relics, the Panja
exactly.
T-shirts, coveted items in our industry.
And like, everyone just kind of looked at each other and goes, "What?" And like a year later. But those types of stories are just great. I love that type of history.
Yeah, there's a lot of history here. So, well, I guess that kind of brings us, speaking like about the numbers and everything, I guess that brings us to what NextMarket Insights is, and that's kind of your day job, right? Or you spend most of your time writing for that, or for?
Yeah, so my day job is, or really kind of my business is as an independent analyst, and my research company is called NextMarket Insights, and out of that I do consulting as well as write reports. So I'll put out press releases on reports about the size of the DIY smart home market, or the size of like the home security market, and these are based on like conversations that I have with all the players in the market. I put a smart lock report out. And I don't want to spend I'm not trying to sell my stuff or anything, but I spent like 2 months talking to every smart lock player in the market, and I put out a smart lock report, and no one had really done that. So it's just fun to dive deep. That's what I love about being an analyst. It's like I could spend a month just talking to everyone in a certain sector and write about it, and it's a narrow knowledge set, right? But there's some people who want that type of stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And by the way, it's okay. You can sell your stuff if you want.
By the way,
go ahead.
All subscribers get a 15% discount now.
Yeah. But that does bring me to something I wanted to ask you about, and that's your most recent report came out, and it's one that I think would be interesting to our listeners who may not have heard of it yet, and that was all about the DIY market for home automation. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. So, I tend to, and I think I don't think I'm unique in this way, in that I kind of tend to segment the market in a couple buckets. One of them obviously is the professional installed market, which you guys are intimate with. I also look at the service provider market. So there's a pretty robust business for the Comcast of the world and the Cox of the world installing iControl based products, and then the last segment of the market, which I think actually has probably the biggest growth potential in terms of just the number of nodes installed, because it's truly going to be a mass market, is the DIY. And that's really anything that a consumer buys and installs themselves. And there may be mixed markets here. There might be like iControl based platforms that you start to install your kind of stuff on. But at the end of the day, I do think that a lot of the ways people start to touch the smart home market will be buying point products, meaning stuff like, okay, I'm going to go get a Philips Hue light bulb, or I might end up getting a smart lock or something like that. And that's like kind of my first toe in the water of the smart home. And then and you're starting to see like a lot of momentum in that space right now. So you look at some of the hits, and it's a hits business, as most consumers businesses are. Nest is obviously a hit. You know, they're talking by the end of this year, at least 2 million households. The drop cam IP Wi-Fi network camera, you know, those definitely in the hundreds of thousands. I'm hearing lots of momentum for smart locks. And so I just think these particular point products, consumers can understand, they can get their mind around. If they're not too difficult and they're well done, they can install them. And they're at low price points. So I think that's where you're going to see a ton of volume in the future.
Yeah, and that was kind of the gist of the report, is that this DIY home automation market is really set to skyrocket. I think you're putting it at 7.8 billion by 2019. So definitely an exciting space to watch. I agree completely with kind of the way that you are segmenting the industry. I think you've got, you know, your three buckets that I've heard you talk about, and how things are kind of divided up, I think is a pretty accurate way to look at the market currently. What I'm wondering is, just from your opinion and all the research that you've done, do you predict that we'll see more of maybe a blending of these traditional dealer installed home automation companies kind of moving down market, or do you predict that they're really just the writing's on the wall, and that they'll eventually be pushed out by more of these DIY oriented solutions?
You know, I don't think that you'll ever see dealer installed stuff go away, because I think that there's a level of integration you get with the professional install that is very hard to get from a purely consumer installed solution. And certainly looking at what you can get today by integrating the home entertainment island with the home systems island and all that, that's just not possible unless you go with like a Control4 or like another higher end solution. Now, I would never rule out Magic from Apple. You know, we've yet to kind of really see what they can do, but nothing I've seen on the DIY side of things looks like it's going to get there that quickly. But also, I think just looking at the higher income marketplace, there's always going to be a desire by higher income people and new builds, for example. Maybe to have like a pro put this together and get this level of professionalism and integration that you'd never be able to get with like just buying piecemeal parts or having like Comcast come in and install it.
Yeah, I think Jason and I would probably have to agree with you there. I had some minor landscaping done recently, and I could have done it myself for sure and saved a little bit of money, but it's a job, you know, and it's one of those things that maybe not everybody has the skill or the ability to do, or just doesn't have the time, like in my case. So you end up hiring someone else, a professional, to do it for you. And I kind of think that's the way our market will eventually head, is there's the professionals out there that can put this together quickly, easily. They have all the tools, they have all the right parts and pieces, and they have the experience to do it quickly, even though it's a plug-and-play system. I mean, for the most part, Control4 is pretty plug-and-play. I have consumers that could, and customers of mine, rather, that could easily install a Control4 system and do everything, if not more, than I could do. But the vast majority of our customers come into our store and they look for us to be the experts and put everything together for them. So they just don't have to worry about it.
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, going back to like 2000, I remember IBM was rolling out these, I forgot what the name of it was, but they had like a whole home wiring system with like with the home
yes.
run.
I have one of those in my office.
Yeah. And they had like the hub and the thinking was at the time, like, home networking is so advanced that you need, so, you know, maybe to have one of these installed and definitely take a pro. Certainly, I think that if, you know, look how commoditized home networking got and how easy it is for a router to install a router, and how nowadays oftentimes you're it's Comcast installing the router. So I do think like there's some possibility that a part of the market on the smart home space could get eaten up a little bit by the service providers in particular, because I don't think they're going to give up on this market, and they could come down in price. But I always think like there's always going to be, like you said, people who, even though it's like Control 4 is basically kind of self-configurable, they want a pro to put it in. And look, I know Seth and Jason, you guys probably do a ton of Sonos, right? I mean, I remember talking to Seth when we were talking to Aaron Cohen, but Sonos couldn't be easier to install yourself. But if people want you to install that, it just shows you there's a certain segment of the market that's always going to want a professional to come in and kind of turn the knobs, plug in things, and maybe turn a few screws.
It's the IBM
definitely.
Home Director.
The Home Director.
Yeah, just thought about it. Yeah. Put a link in the show notes.
So but I do agree. I think that there is always going to be a segment of the market where this is just a technology and a kind of a service that they're going to want provided for them, and we are seeing more and more of that in our industry, where companies are kind of moving more towards like a recurring revenue service-based pricing model. Obviously, we're making some money when we sell the hardware, but less and less these days. Margins are disappearing everywhere on what we sell, and it's becoming increasingly important for integrators to kind of charge that managed that recurring kind of service fee. But it sounds to me like you think that really the cable companies are going to be where we're competing in that segment, and you see more growth coming from managed service providers like cable companies in this market.
Yeah, because I think they're already using installers who they're training. And so when I talk to the guys working with those, the guys who before may have just been installing like a cable modem or whatever, those guys are training to do smart home stuff now. So I think there could be a business for someone who does truck rolls, because a lot of times they're independent contractors, to just start like putting in a smart home hub, and installing a Sonos and like a couple of door sensors. So I think because of professionals coming out in general, they're not as good as you guys, but I just think as they get trained, they're gonna learn more, and maybe they could put in baseline systems.
Yeah, and of course, all of this just brings awareness to the industry. A couple of years ago, I'd say probably a year or two ago, people would walk into our showroom and I'd pick up an iPad and turn on a light, and they'd say, "Oh, you can do that." That was magic at the time. Yeah. And now I think with, like you said, the service providers getting into it, ADT, people are just kind of, okay, yeah, I know I can do that. I know I can buy some Philips Hue light bulbs and control it with my phone. So now it's one of those things that's just kind of expected. Not really expected. It's just they know about it at least. And
yeah, it's not a miracle anymore. It's I mean, and Apple commercials and those types of things always educate the market. But I still think like it's still cool. It's still like, wow, you can do that. Like I think even though they're not like, that's a miracle, it's still like, oh wow, that's really cool. And I still think we're in that phase of the market for a couple of years.
Yeah, it's definitely still the early adopters. But you also said the magic word there, Apple. So in about 2 weeks, I guess a week from when this episode will go out, Apple will be having a show, and they'll be announcing possibly things we don't know, possibly the iPhone 6. No one really knows. But they also will be releasing, or in the near future, they'll be releasing iOS 8. They'll be releasing the new version of OS X, and that will have built into it the HomeKit software features, which we've covered on a couple of shows. What do you think? Have you seen people really talking about HomeKit? And what do you think its influence is going to be on both DIY and CEDIA market vendors?
I think I've heard certainly interest from the point solution providers, and not only HomeKit, like I think HealthKit, and just things like continuity. I mean, one of the things they talked about with at the last Worldwide Developers Conference was this idea of continuity. And so this back like 10 years ago, or 7 years ago, we talked about 3-screen video distribution, right? And I think now I think the ability of a seamless experience across your mobile, your PC, maybe your car dash, and your wearable, and all kind of working off of a similar framework to kind of integrate with your home systems and your home entertainment. I think that's what Apple's bigger vision is, and I think the plumbing of that is HomeKit. And the reason I mentioned HealthKit is, I mean, I've been talking to a lot of fitness and wearable companies, and this kind of as my overall coverage, and even and talking to home systems guys or kind of the DIY guys, and for example, the kitchen. There is interest in taking information based on HealthKit and integrating that with the smart home. So you can imagine user scenarios like, I went out and ran 5 miles, and I based on my movement and my part of the day, that I haven't eaten, I probably need to consume some calories. If that's integrated, for example, with like my kitchen or something like that, you can then start to envision like recommendation scenarios around food intake or even turning on the oven or whatever. I mean, I'm probably not very good at articulating that, but I definitely am hearing interest on like integration of HealthKit with the smart home as well.
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there with saying the word plumbing, because that's really all HomeKit and HealthKit are. There's kind of the really low end levels of what you can do with those products, but it's going to be up to the developers to do some crazy things with those. And I think that there's probably enough carrot and stick, from Apple for them to actually get up and do something with those two. Considering both the health market and what looks like going to be a pretty vibrant home automation market here in the future. I know that Alex Hawkinson, I believe, from SmartThings is committed to, or at least said publicly that they're trying to do a HomeKit update, I guess, whenever that's available. So I think that's going to be pretty cool for their users.
Yeah, I think anytime you can jump on the Apple train that they're going to advertise around, they're going to build awareness around. If you're like a closely held partner, you can actually get into some of their commercials that they show in the Super Bowl. I mean, I think there's nothing. If you're like a point solution provider, why wouldn't you integrate HealthKit? From a technological perspective, it's not like overwhelming, because from my understanding, it's mainly software plumbing. And then what'll be interesting to me is maybe the development of like really interesting apps outside of any sort of hardware. So, I mean, if you look at the Wink app, for example, the Wink app was really existed before there's ever like a Wink hub. And I think now you can have really interesting app developers come into the iOS marketplace with like smart home super apps that have nothing to do with any sort of hardware, like in terms of like the company making it isn't necessarily selling hardware, but maybe someone wants to make the best smart home app, and they integrate everyone that has integrated HomeKit then can connect to this app, and they do a really good job on a UI. So I'm kind of excited about the software possibilities with HomeKit and some of the innovation we'll see there.
Yeah, same.
Yeah. I think it's definitely exciting. One of the challenges and the reasons why, like you mentioned earlier, having a fully integrated home is still really the realm of like a dealer installed professional system, and a lot of the challenges just stem from the fact that manufacturers, even though people have tried before, they really don't have an incentive to kind of adhere to standards across the board, the way that things have happened in like the networking world, for example.
Yeah.
My take on HomeKit, though, is that the fact that Apple is behind it kind of changes the game in the sense that they carry a bigger stick, so to speak, and I personally think that manufacturers, will get in line and get excited about this. In my opinion, the success of it kind of hinges on that. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think the manufacturers are going to take to HomeKit, and you think we'll start to see this implemented pretty commonly?
I think so. I mean, I think guys like Samsung, LG, and the companies who have tendencies to maybe think about doing platforms, they might be on the fence because getting in bed with Apple, who knows? I think if you're like someone who's like makes like a lock or like lighting or whatever, why wouldn't you? I definitely think anyone makes that type of endpoint hardware definitely will get on board. But what's interesting, what I'd love to talk about, what you guys think is let's speculate a little bit about what Apple's going to do from a hardware perspective, because I think they're due for a refresh on Apple TV. I was just at Costco today, and they're selling the Apple TV for $85 with $10 of iTunes.
Yeah.
I'm like, that seems like they're trying to clear those out. Like, so
Yeah.
if they're trying
Just
to
a
clear
little.
if they're trying to clear out this generation of Apple TV, are we going to see a new one? And wouldn't it be crazy if we saw Apple TV in a new Apple TV with like Bluetooth smart integrated, and maybe even like, who knows, definitely maybe native 2.15.4 radio. I'm just kind of, that might be a little bit far fetched, but definitely HomeKit integrated. That would be really interesting.
I could see them doing Bluetooth for sure, with all what we've been seeing with iBeacons and everything going on there.
They already have Bluetooth in the Apple TV.
In the Apple TV?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's already in there. Like they just,
maybe they do. Maybe for the remote. Yeah, I guess I don't have an Apple TV. I probably should know that, but imagine with HomeKit and beacon technology, that would be pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to get to your original question, I think it would be a perfect fit. I mean, it's been a long time, especially in the technology world. It's been a really long time since we've seen a new Apple TV come to market. Like you said, the fact that it looks like kind of like they're trying to clear them out, get them off clear the shelf space for possibly a new model. It just makes perfect sense. And the thing that's compelling to me about an Apple TV that is capable of acting as a home automation hub is that if they can keep that $100 price point, it's appealing to people as a standalone product, just doing what it already does. And then, you add to that the layer of HomeKit and home automation that can go on top of that. So it kind of really gives them a great entry point into a huge portions of the market, because even people who aren't even thinking about home automation are going to go out and buy these and then maybe come to realize later on, oh, this can do home automation. And that might not have even factored into their buying decision.
Yeah. I mean, I think that at some point, Apple knows that having the iPhone as the only control point in a smart home just won't work, because I leave with my phone, and where does that leave? Or my wife leaves with her phone, and I'm an Android guy. Where does that leave me? If there's no iOS device in the house. So I think they definitely want to have some sort of fixed control point in the home, and Apple TV always seemed like the most logical to me.
Yeah, this has my earlier when you were talking about control points and endpoints, I was thinking of the Nest thermostat, and you said that was in 2 million homes or abouts there, at least what they've said.
Yeah. So in January when they sold to Google, they said they're in a million households, and just basically on kind of my own estimations on the run rate, I could see them being at 2 million households by the end of this year, just on how fast they're growing, if they kind of kept with the same run rate. Yeah,
I was thinking that. I mean, that we do a lot of talking about hubs, and Nest has kind of done it backwards, and they've put a hub on the wall, and it actually does something. It actually gives you a thermostat at the same time, and now they're talking about Thread and reaching out to other devices. They have Dropcam kind of coming in-house. But now we're talking about Apple and Apple TV. It would be a pretty cool switch for them to flip and turn the Apple TV into a hub. I think we've speculated about this before in the past, but it's that I think the numbers would be staggering, if not, a whole lot more than Nest. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot more Apple TVs out there than there are Nest thermostats installed.
It's kind of their secret weapon. I mean, yeah. It's like it's people. I mean, we're talking numbers in the tens of millions now with Apple TVs already installed, and then if they came out with like a really compelling new one that drove the numbers before the holiday season, that'd be really interesting. And the price point's great. I mean, $99, if they could stick at that price point, that's still very compelling.
Yeah, definitely. I'm really just hoping for a new Mac Mini, honestly.
That's been a long time, too. I think 2011 was the last time, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's old. It's old. It's way back.
When I realized you could put 16 gigs of memory in my Mac Mini, though, that made life a little easier. But we definitely need some new hardware.
Yeah, and I think, I hope, I should say, that we'll see some soon. All this talk about Apple, though, I wanted to ask you, do you envision a future here soon where people are going to sort of have to pick an operating system for their home, like in the way that we currently have to do for our offices or our personal computers? Do you kind of see this shaping up in a way that people might have to say, okay, I'm an Apple home, or I'm a Nest home, or possibly a Samsung home. Now they're making some moves in the market. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I hope not. I just feel like walled gardens are hard, but at the same time, I feel like there's a reason why Staples, and there's a reason why Lowe's and all these guys are kind of investing in their own branded platforms, and that they probably feel that there's going to be some. It'll pull in if they can get someone to center on their platform, that would have virtuous effects for just buying other devices. And I think there's maybe some logic to that. I think the smart people in the industry realize, though, consumers are going to get really mad and disenchanted with the idea of the smart home if they buy a light bulb at Lowe's and then go home and it doesn't work because the hub is from Home Depot, or if they buy a light bulb and it's at the Apple store and they go home and it doesn't work because you have Nest or something. I just think at some level there needs to be interoperability. I mean, if you look back at the early network guys, the Robert Metcalfs of the world, and those guys had it right. And you really kind of need. Sure, you had some battles. You had token ring versus Ethernet, but ultimately at the end of the day, they figured it out and everything started to work together. And I feel like you can't really have a mass market with a bunch of tons of silos and operating systems. I mean, if you're sure you can be Apple centric to a degree, but I still feel like you can't go to the point where the endpoints and like the locks and the sensors don't interoperate with everything. So maybe there's some advantage. Maybe Apple has some level of control. Maybe Google does. But at the end of the day, I think most of the points that you plug in, most of the nodes you plug in, need to work with everything. That was a long answer. I hope. I kind of rambled. But.
No, it was a good answer. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think perfect sense.
Yeah, and I think that's why Apple. I think it's smart what they did with the HomeKit's kind of like hands off. They're not really saying we're going to be the hub of the home, but they're saying we'll keep all this stuff organized and fall in line with our protocol, but we'll keep all this organized. And like you said, you're going to have some of the best graphic GUI developers making some really nice front ends for maybe home automation products that you already have in your house. And I think that's a pretty cool way of doing it. Something I never thought about, just to kind of sit on the outside and say, all right, I'll just organize this stuff, put it in one database, and then you can write an app for it, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, we really haven't seen like this great software innovation around the smart home yet. I mean, I feel like everyone's excited about hardware, but think about with all this, the plumbing being laid down by Apple and Google. I'm excited for a lot of the software innovation.
Yep.
And that'll start to catch up over the next couple of years, and so we'll see some really cool like control apps and all sorts of interesting things coming there.
Cool. So looking to the future, that's one announcement that comes out, a major announcement that comes out the week of our CEDIA show. So it looks like there's going to be a number of announcements coming out at CEDIA as well, and those will probably talk about on a later show. But are you expecting anything kind of crazy at CEDIA, or you have plans for CEDIA?
Well, I'm speaking on a panel called Commoditized Home Automation. It's not a threat. So if anyone's going, I'd love to see there and kind of say hi there. But I don't know. I haven't been to CEDIA in a few years, so I'm really excited to catch up with it. But I think we were talking before the show about things like this. The article about Savan over at CE Pro. I just feel like even the CEDIA channel is really intrigued by the momentum that the smart home has. And I think kind of one of the big bangs was really kind of the Google Nest acquisition. And I really kind of feel like everyone in the industry, from the professional installed on down, really started to kind of try to put their A game on this year. And I feel like, because they feel like that may have been a turning point. So I'm really intrigued to see what CEDIA is like this year, kind of in this new hot environment.
Yeah, it feels new. It felt new last year when I was seeing companies like Revolve and Doorbot show up.
Yeah.
And now I know that there's going to be some more, purely consumer-facing products showing up at what is traditionally only a dealer installer channel trade show. So yeah, it's definitely feeling different this year too.
It would be cool if the CEDIA show became like this more broad kind of consumer connected home show with a strong kind of professional style component, but like more, but also more of the other stuff. Because I feel like CES is just too big and unwieldy now.
Too much noise. Yeah.
And I don't feel like there's a great smart home show. I mean, maybe CEDIA can be that.
Yeah, that would
I think
be cool.
that CEDIA is. I think it's moving in that direction. But I think probably if you were to speak to the board members of CEDIA, I think they want to protect CEDIA from turning into another CES. So I think they're going to kind of walk a line there.
Yeah, that's a good point. But
they want to stay focused a little bit. But I agree.
But you'll never see like the thing with CS. So you like there's drones, there's robots, there's cars. Like so maybe if they just kind of stuck to the home. But you're right. You could get pretty big there, but if they just kind of stuck to their knitting around just the connected home, that would be really great.
Yeah. No, and Seth and I have talked about that before. I mean, we already sort of see it happening because it's, when CEDIA first started, it was all about just the custom install channel. And now we're seeing products like Revolve has a big showing there, and we're seeing more and more of that. So I'm excited to be out at the show this year. I'm going to try to make it to your panel. I seem to recall it's not coming to my head right now. When exactly is your panel?
Yeah, my panel is on Friday from 3:30 to 5, Friday, September 12th. And it's called Commoditized Home Automation. It's not a threat. And I'll be on the panel with a couple other their luminaries. I'm certainly not, but Reza Raji. Reza I know from like going way back. He's the founder of iControl. I knew him when he was even before those days. Jim Carroll from Savant and Peter Aylett, the CTO of Archimedia. And it's moderated by Gordon Van Zwieden of Cyberrunner.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I will be at CEDIA. I know Jason's going to be at CEDIA. We'll try and see what the talk is about and catch up then.
Yeah, and maybe we could get a beer afterwards.
No, that's what I was thinking.
That's really what I want.
Well, Mike, thanks. We really appreciate your time and coming on the show and talking about the market with us a little bit here.
Yeah, I mean, I love your guys' show, and I love your rapport, and I'm a dedicated fan. So I'm really happy to be on your show. I appreciate it, and it's been fun.
All right. Well, yeah. Thanks again, Mike. We look forward to connecting with you out at CEDIA.
All right. We'll talk to you soon, guys.
All right. Take care.
Thanks, Mike.